Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Hi everyone, welcome to Teaching with Task Analysis. I am Mo Buti. I've been in the field of disabilities for over 31 years. I was a special education teacher, an autism itinerant, and a special education administrator. I was the director of autism and intellectual disabilities for Chicago Public Schools. I'm now the proud owner of IEPA, which stands for Advocate and Instructional Expert for People with Autism. All right, let's begin. Autism. It's a developmental disability that significantly affects verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction. Some are involved with engagement in repetitive activities or stereotype movements. Some demonstrate resistance to environmental change or change in daily routines. And some demonstrate unusual responses to sensory experiences. Today, we're going to talk about task analysis. What is that? Well, a task analysis is a process of breaking a skill or a task down into smaller, specific, more manageable steps in order to complete a skill. The important part I want to drive home today is how to make that visual, because our students with autism, based on their profiles that I just explained, really respond well to visuals. Visuals can really help students with processing information. They can make more abstract information concrete. And the processing is the big thing. Because it's visual, it stays there long enough for them to process it, to go back and get the details they might have forgotten, to help them remembering all the steps. So making it visual is key. Why are we going to use a task analysis? Well, it's great for teaching one step at a time until a skill is mastered. You slowly will include an additional step until they can do all the steps. It's easier to teach things in smaller, more manageable steps. And you know what I love about it? It really shows where the deficit is. So you might have a student that, or a child at home who maybe can't make their own lunch. Let's say peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they just can't do it. Well, if you do a task analysis and break it down, you might find out they actually could do it. They just couldn't open the jar of peanut butter. So if you broke it down to those steps, you would then identify that's the skill I need to teach, right? So it helps you determine where the deficit is. And what's really important is using the same language throughout the environment. So we'll get into that in more detail. So when you're doing task analysis, you're going to think about chaining. So chaining, there's multiple kinds. There's three. So forward chaining would be teaching the sequence from the beginning of the task to the end in that order. And they have to master the first part of the skill, and then you go through the rest of them. Once they've mastered that, you add the next step, and then you go through the rest of them. So typically the learner doesn't move on to doing the next step alone until they've really mastered that first step. So they're learning it in a very logical sequence from beginning to end. Sometimes backward chaining is used, and that's when you complete the entire task, stop right before the very last task step, and that's where you begin to teach them. So, and then moving back, adding an additional part of the task as you move forward, as they master that last step. The individuals immediately understand the benefit of the completion of the task. So I've often used this when I'm teaching maybe things like toileting skills, and the very end might be the buttoning of the pants. So we finished everything. I'm physically helping you through every step. I stop before the button, and that's the skill I teach. So the reason why that might be more rewarding is because that's the end. Yes, you're done. You did a great job, because then the whole task is done. And then the final kind of chaining strategy is total task teaching. So you're really teaching the entire task all at once, the total task, when you learn the entire routine with no interruptions. This might be more useful if there's less steps involved, or if you know the child already has many of the steps already learned. So I really like using this, like I said earlier, to find that missing skill that is needed, that needs that explicit instruction, right? It might just be one part of the complete task they can't do. And just by learning that, they can be independent. So what activities are good to use task analysis for? Well, really any activity that has multiple steps. Typically, it's really helpful for ADLs, right? Activities of daily living. Also routines, very good for very specific routines that stay the same each time. School routines, morning routine, evening routine. You can even use them for play and socialization. Things around the house like cooking and cleaning, great activities to use. It's good for these like desensitization programs like tolerating haircuts, going to the doctor, going to the dentist. So take the task and break it down. So you really want to actually write it down, because it's funny when you're doing it, you might forget steps because you do it so innately, right? Like you're always doing it. So write down the steps and then determine how to make them visual. Because look here, this is 3 different ones on washing your hands, and they're all totally different. And it depends on how much detail the student needs. I have one here, for example, with the same skill, washing hands, but like look at how many steps. This is like turn the water on, then it is wet your hands, pump the soap. I mean, it's super detailed. Rub hands together, rub the top of your hands. So this one is all the same as all of these. It just depends on how much detail your student needs, support they need, and where you are. Because for instance, at home, maybe it's a bar of soap. At school, it's a pump of soap. And what kind of pump is it? And maybe it's an air dryer, not a paper towel. Maybe it's a towel. So those details are really important. So this is what I'm talking about. So for example, teaching to make your own lunch for your own sandwich for lunch. So we made that whole task analysis, we broke it down, and we're teaching the skill, and boom, there's a Ziploc baggie, not the twisty tie. It's a whole new skill you have to teach. So like laundry, I'm teaching laundry. And actually, this is a true story. I did this in a group home, and they had laundry pods, and the staff member at home used liquid soap. So she was writing her task analysis, and it was like 1 cup of soap. And I was like, oh, they use laundry pods. So total different skill. The task analysis visually looked different, right? Pump soap versus bar soap. Totally different skill. Pumping soap versus having a bar of soap in your hand. Twist cap versus pop-off top. Desk versus table. So really think about those details, because I'm going to show you this picture here. So even just looking at them, obviously they look really different. But this might also help you to determine what's the most kind of appropriate component for the student. So the soap, the pump versus the bar. I've had students that try to use the bar soap and it just flies out of their hand and they just can't control it. You know what? Let's use the pump. They use it in school. Let's use it at home. Let's have that same visual. We'll break it down the same way. So there's that consistency, and the visual can be used both ways. But even when you just look at these pictures, see how different they all are and the skill required. When I think of the twisty tie and the Ziploc baggie. Yeah, they both might be fine motor, but totally different skills. And you also want to consider this, because this happened before, with peanut butter. It's just an example. So the child, we did realize he could not unscrew the top. So that was a skill we taught. We taught it with different size jars. We taught some that were brand new that's harder to open versus one that's maybe looser because it's been open. So we practice, taught, and the child gets it. Well, guess what happens when you get a new bottle or jar of peanut butter? You open it up, it's covered with that paper and it's really hard to get off. So that was a whole new skill, and we had to create a new task analysis and a new visual support to go with it, and practice. What is the strategy that we are going to use to get that child to be able to get that off? So more examples of some visuals that are supporting our task analysis, our breakdown of the skill. And what's important is that we're taking data. So on the right, this is data, because we, again, need to know where is the deficit? Where is that missing link that needs explicit instruction? So did they do it independently? Did they need a direct prompt or a physical prompt? And then we can pull that skill out and teach it explicitly. So the data is very important. Data is ours. So I also want to show you some other ones that I have created here. So it can even be like this one, they call it the schedule, but it really is the task analysis. And this one is the same or different for girl versus the boy going to the bathroom, right? So although it's called a schedule, it's really that task analysis, right? Making a visual. Some people like it going up and down. So like here's one for brushing your teeth. Looks kind of like a schedule because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. And the importance here is to make sure we're communicating with all environments so that we're really teaching those important skills that can be transferred from different environments, right? So we're doing it in the same way. So I have so many examples of these, but I will stop with that. And my final thought, if you're teaching something that has multiple steps, break it down into small steps, all the steps that are required to complete the full task, and then make it visual. Use that assistive tech of a visual support and use that visual for instruction. And remember, make sure you're using the same consistent language and types throughout the different environments. So we're not teaching one skill of pump soap where they're never going to be around pump soap again. Just an example. But those are my final thoughts. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. I'm Mo Buti. You can reach me at mobuti@hotmail.com or check out my website down below at aiepautism.com. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP education program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.